Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. And today we start Unit 2, the Enlightenment. And this is one of our more lengthier units of study just because it is at the beginning of the year and it's kind of important on where we're going and like the beginning, you could almost say the beginning of humanity. But enough of me. Let's get into this video. So this is your second type of note-taking. So remember, we write the titles. Please also include the chapter and section from where these notes come from. Philosophy in the Age of Reason. The Enlightenment is an AKA the Age of Reason is another name for the Enlightenment. We already did the warm-up. Objectives. Now notice there ain't any red, so you don't need to write it down. All right. Objectives are for me to tell you at the beginning of each lecture, so don't worry about writing these down. Students will be able to, at the end of this lecture, analyze the Enlightenment and the ideas that came forth from this time period, and also compare the ideas from Enlightenment thinkers of Hobbes, Locke, Montesquieu, Rousseau, etc. Boom. Scientific Revolution. Okay, so the Scientific Revolution, we kind of start here, mainly because this way of thinking, the Scientific Revolution and the Enlightenment would come off the tails of the Renaissance and the Reformation, and it's not like one follows the other. They kind of coexist. One overlaps the other, that sort of way. So the Scientific Revolution kind of started first and occurred during the 1500s and 1600s, and it transformed the way people in Europe looked at the world. These scientific successes were convinced educated Europeans of the power of human reason. So a typical question people might say, if natural law exists in the real world, why can't it be applied to social, economic, and political problems? So using these methods of applied science, reformers set out to study human behavior and solve the problems of society. And I ask you don't really have to write down what is in parentheses, but that's kind of a rhetorical question. Do you think that is a good thing, that people should fix the problems of society and not have them fixed for them? Question mark. All right. One revolution leads to another, like I said. The thinking that steered the scientific revolution led to a whole new revolution of thinking called the Enlightenment. And the German philosopher Immanuel Kant was one of the first to describe this era with the word enlightenment. Although he was skeptical about the power of human reason, he was enthusiastic that natural law could help explain aspects of humanity. So then we're going to talk about these two men, Hobbes versus Locke. Okay, so Thomas Hobbes is the first person we're going to talk about, and he wrote about his beliefs in a book called Leviathan. And he argued that people were naturally cruel, greedy, and selfish. That is his belief of human nature. He believes that if people were not strictly controlled, they would fight, rob, and oppress one another. So they have to be under control. And he said life in this state of nature would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, short. So to avoid this, he said people entered a social contract. Hobbes believed that only a powerful government could ensure an orderly society. And, piggybacking off our last unit, His favorite type of government would be, for example, an absolute monarchy, where the monarch rules absolutely. So that's our boy, Thomas Hobbes. Now, John Locke is of another breed. Locke is obviously the opposite of Hobbes's argument. He had a more optimistic view of human nature. He believed that people were reasonable and moral. Okay, he believed that people had these things called natural rights from birth, which are a right to life, a right to liberty, and a right to property. And that means the ability to own land. Okay, he wrote a famous pamphlet called The Two Treatises of Government. And in it, he argued that people form governments to protect their natural rights. People form them, not the rich and the wealthy and the able, the people, everybody. And he said the best kind of government had limited power and was accepted by all citizens. And that's the key word, citizen. What defines a citizen in these times? Okay, you don't remember the Glorious Revolution because I haven't talked about it yet. But basically, that's when England is going through some craziness, and they kill their king. Then they have a civil war. Then they have something called the Long Parliament, where Parliament is running the country. They bring back the king, the executed king's brother, and then his son comes through, and it's all, religion, Catholicism, and Protestantism don't mix, and you're going to see that a lot especially in England. Catholics, or not even in England, Catholics just aren't treated in the right way. So the Glorious Revolution was a bloodless exchange of power. They got rid of the monarch's son, who was secretly Catholic, for I think their sister and her husband. Anywho, so there's all these change in governments, all these change in leaders. So Hobbes and Locke are writing at this time of turmoil. So they too had a view, and they too wanted change. They wanted a real leader. They wanted a real leadership. Okay. So if you were an educated fellow, you too would want a stable government. So as you can guess, Locke rejected Hobbes' view of the absolute monarch, and he said James II violated rights of English citizens. During this time, Locke is going to propose a radical idea that the government has an obligation to the people it governs. If such a government fails its obligations or violates their natural rights, it is only right for the citizens to overthrow that government. And that is an idea that the founding fathers of the United States of America, the writers of the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, the French Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, and all future declarations where they are trying to declare themselves independent from a authoritative government over them. This idea sticks in the back of your brain. So remember this idea, all right? If a government fails or violates people's natural rights, it's only right for the people to overthrow that government. And that's our boy, John Locke. All right, so the French get involved. So the ideas of Hobbes and Locke in England spread to France and eventually to the rest of Europe. You have the big four: Montesquieu, Voltaire, Diderot, and Rousseau. And these guys are known as the philosophes, aka the French word for philosopher, philosophe. And they believe that they can use reason to lead to more reforms of government, law, and society. So first up, Baron de Montesquieu. So Montesquieu and his ideas of separation of powers. So Montesquieu studied the governments from across Europe's history, from Italy to England and everything in between. And he was a sharp critic of absolute monarchy. In 1748, he published his book, Spirit of the Laws, which discussed the different governments throughout history, like I just said. He felt that the best way to protect liberty, freedom, was to divide the various functions and powers among three branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. He believed that each branch of government should serve as a check on the other two, and this is where you get the term checks and balances. And this is going to heavily influence the framers of the United States Constitution. And BT dubs, if you wanted to know, it also stems from the Roman Empire having checks and balances. So if you really think of it, the U.S. checks and balances system is just a sophisticated version of rock, paper, scissors. There is no real one powerful leader, because in the end, someone loses and someone wins. If you're playing rock, paper, scissors, not in government. And we got our boy Voltaire, aka, well, that's his pen name. His real name is Francois Marie Arouet. I say Arouet, but if any people are out there, French speakers, let me know. All right, Voltaire stood for the freedom of speech. He is regarded as one of the most famous of the philosophers, and he said, "My trade is to say what I think." He used his wit as a weapon to expose the abuses of his day, so he's going to target corrupt officials and idle aristocrats. He battled inequality, injustice, superstition. He denounced the slave trade and deplored religious prejudice. His outspoken attacks offended the French government and the CC. I abbreviate, so this is the first time you're seeing this. I abbreviate a lot of things, and CC stands for Catholic Church. So make sure you know what CC stands for, Catholic Church. So the French government and the French Catholic Church, so naturally he would be imprisoned, and then he was exiled, kicked out of the country, and his books would be outlawed. You couldn't buy them. It was against the law to buy them. It was against the law to read them. And naturally, they were burned. But it's important to know that Voltaire stood for the freedom of speech. And then we got this guy. His name is Denis Diderot. Who dis? Well, he is the man who wrote the original encyclopedia, or encyclopediae, because we're French. And it was a 28-volume set of books. And his purpose was, quote, to change the general way of thinking, and by explaining ideas on topics such as government, philosophy, and religion. So if you think Wikipedia, well, before Wikipedia, there were actual encyclopedia books before the internet, and that's where you would go search up some basic information. So that's this guy, Denis Diderot. And it included articles by Montesquieu and Voltaire, among others. These articles include the denouncing of slavery, praising freedom of expression, and urging education of all people. And he also attacked the divine right theory and traditional religions. So, claiming that, how monarchs claim that they get their right to rule from up above, from God. Well, he did not think that was actually true. And traditional religions over here, we're talking about Catholicism, Christianity, same thing. Islam, and I believe Judaism, same thing. And obviously, attacking these traditional religions ain't going to go over well with the Pope or the Roman Catholic Church. Remember, every country, well, mostly every country, every kingdom in Europe at this time is Catholic. And the leader of the Catholic Church is the Pope. So next we have our boy Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So he has this idea of the social contract. He believed that people in their natural state were basically good and that this innocence was corrupted by the evils of society, especially in regards to the unequal distribution of property. He wrote a book called The Social Contract in 1762. And Rousseau felt that society placed too many limitations on people's behaviors. Some were necessary, but others should be minimal. So Rousseau put his faith in the general will of people. And he said the good of the community should be placed above all individual interests. Okay. Oh, hey, you can't have all men in this lecture. We always got to talk about the ladies. So, hey, women, how do you feel? What do you think of this Enlightenment idea? Well, the Enlightenment slogan, free and equal, didn't necessarily apply to women. The other half of the planet Earth. Philosophers said women had natural rights, but they were limited to the areas of the home and the family. Yeah, they're at home, quarantined. During the 1700s, however, a small group of women were going to protest this idea. And you have famous women by the name of Germaine de Stael in France, and then Catherine Macaulay and Mary Wollstonecraft in Britain, that are going to argue that women were being excluded from this, quote, social contract. So that's our bae, Germaine de Stael, Catherine Macaulay, and our girl, our sis, Mary Wollstonecraft. We're going to talk about Mary Wollstonecraft because she's the most famous of the three, and she's got 3 syllables in her last name. So naturally, Wollstonecraft, she was a well-known British social critic. She accepted that a woman's first duty was to be a good mother, but felt that a woman should be able to decide what was in her own interest without depending on her man's. Okay, so she's going to write a famous book called A Vindication of the Rights of Woman in 1792. And in it, she's going to call for the equal education for girls and boys to receive the same. And she also said only education could give women the tools they needed to participate equally in public life. And then we're going to, okay, we've been thinking about society, government, social constraints and all that. Well, now we're going to move on to economics because there's another big thing going on in the world that, needs reforming. So you have these French thinkers, also happening in France, called physiocrats, and they focused on economic reforms. And they claimed that their rationale for economic reform was based on natural laws of economics. So physiocrats rejected mercantilism. And if you don't know what mercantilism is, it is where government's regulation of the economy was to achieve a favorable balance of trade. It's basically exporting more than you're importing. So you're selling a lot more, getting a lot more money than you are importing, bringing in from other countries. So you always want to have a favorable balance of trade and who could earn the most money the quickest, okay? And so they are going to urge for this policy of laissez-faire. You need to know this, laissez-faire, or laissez-faire, whichever way you want to pronounce it. And that allows businesses to operate with little to no government interference. So the government is not interfering with individuals selling their shares, selling whatever they're making. Okay, the government does not interfere. Okay, and they will also, laissez-faire policy also supports free trade and opposes tariffs. And if you don't know what a tariff is a tax on an import or an export. Know it, memorize it, put it to your memory. And our he's not really a physiocrat because, hey, his name is Adam Smith, and that is not a French name. He is Scottish. So Adam Smith, our other big boy name. He is a Scottish economist who admired the physiocrats, and he's going to write a big famous book titled The Wealth of Nations. It is shortened. It's a longer title. It's just abbreviated to The Wealth of Nations. He wrote that there is a free market, and in this free market, it should be allowed to regulate business activity freely. Again, not by the help of the government. And in this book, he's going to try to show how manufacturing, trade, wages, profits, economic growth were all linked to market forces of supply and demand. Whenever there was a demand for goods or services, suppliers would try and seek out to meet the demand in order to gain profits. It's all about making that money, making all that money. And you're going to see this later in economics, your senior year, and you may see it next year in U.S. history. However, this is a simple supply and demand graph. And in it, here, I'm going to use my pointer. You have goods and the quantity of goods on the x-axis, and you have the price on the y-axis. So if demand is high, there's a low quantity, which means the price is more expensive. So demand, there's a small quantity. Think of this as like 1, but the price is at like 10. Okay, whatever it is. You know, people like them iPhones. So the demand is high and the price is high for an iPhone. Would you agree? There's not that many iPhones out there. Well, it used to be like that. Okay. But however, if there's a supply of a lot of things, like let's say white socks. If there's a high supply of white socks, the price is low. All right. And if you want to meet, it's called market equilibrium. It's right in the middle. But I'm going to stop there because, hey, I am not an economics teacher and I will refuse to teach economics. So that is it for today's lecture. I believe your homework is page 58, questions 3 through 5. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. You hit that like button, that subscribe button, get your teacher some clout gang. All right. Without further ado, I'm done. You're done. Hopefully you like this video. As always, stay safe. Wash your hands. Peace.